Hey everybody! In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you a beautiful fresco technique that I learned from my friend Mel McCarthy. And I'm going to make this beautiful, colorful fresco butterfly happy birthday card. It's easier than it looks, I promise. I'm going to start with the new Fluttering 6x6 embossing folder from Stampin' Up! I'll have a link to this on my blog. And I've just used that embossing folder to emboss a piece of watercolor paper that's slightly smaller than a card front. And I'm using my Derwent Intense pencils today. I have these in a global pencil case. And since there are only 72 Inktense pencils, I also have some watercolor pencils in here. Now to begin with, I'm going to just pick out a few colors that I really like and use my aqua painter and a little dish of water to get started. Now when I color with Inktense pencils, I really like to pick the pigment up directly from the lead of the pencil rather than using the pencil to color and then using water. It's just my personal preference. They work great both ways. I'm sort of a painter. I tend to like that process more. And so this is how I like to do it. Now the cool thing about Inktense pencils is once they are dry, they're water soluble when you're working with them, but once they're dry, they are permanent. They have a real vividness like ink. And the cool thing about them being permanent when they're dry is you can do some fun wet techniques on top of them without disturbing the color. And that's why it's perfect for this fresco technique today. You'll also see that they give a good transparency like watercolor. So as I come in with the green pencil and I go on top of the blue, you can still see through it to the blue, but the blue underneath does not move like it would if I were using a watercolor product. Now if you've watched my videos, you know these are sort of my go-to colors. Sort of primary-ish colors. I do love to have a magenta and a turquoise always in what I'm doing. And then a little pop of yellow always makes it fun. Now you'll notice that it looks like a crazy person painted this, and that's because for the technique that we're doing, you don't need any precision at all. It doesn't matter if you get color in the background where the butterflies are not part of the pattern. And it doesn't matter if the color is just randomly applied to the butterflies because it's all going to come together in the rest of the technique. Now the next step is I'm going to take some fairly heavy body acrylic. This is just Liquitex Basics. It's very inexpensive. I'll provide you with a link. And you do want something with a heavier body. You don't want a completely liquid acrylic paint. And then a good old-fashioned Drury Hotel key always comes in handy, or a credit card, or one of those Pampered Chef scrapers. I've even used cardstock for this technique, and on Mel's blog, she also uses watercolor paper to apply the paint. And you're just going to put a pretty thick layer of paint all over both the background and the foreground of your painted butterflies. And you can already see just by covering up sort of the random painting in the background how the butterflies become a little bit more cohesive underneath the paint. And you want to get the lines out, but like I said, leave a pretty thick layer. You want that background to come up a little bit towards the butterfly to really get the fresco effect. Now you really want to let this dry before you start sanding it, and I recommend patience instead of a heat gun because a heat gun can bubble acrylic paint and that will ruin your project. So you just want to be patient, let it dry, and then take a little sanding block and just lightly sand the paint off of the raised butterflies. And this will expose a little bit of the color again, but it'll keep the background neat and somewhat raised from the acrylic paint. And that's what gives it the look of a fresco. It truly looks like plaster. And I'm going in just with a little bit more detail, a little bit more pressure on some places where I want a little bit more color. And these little manicure blocks are so inexpensive. They're a great way to sand. Now this does leave a lot of dust, and you don't want dust for the next step. So take a soft brush. This is actually Splotchy's favorite toy that I'm borrowing. And brush off all the dust. And you can already see the plaster look. It actually looks cool, kind of matte, like it is right now. But for the fresco technique, we do need to make it shiny. So when that's all done, I'll just take Versamark, pat that all over. Again, it doesn't matter whether there is Versamark in the flat areas as well as the raised areas, but you do want to be sure that you cover all the raised areas. And this will make the color that you've exposed through the sanding just a little bit more intense and vivid. But it also gives that final fresco touch. So I'm going to cover this with clear embossing powder. We used 2 entire containers like this of this at my retreat, and we will be doing it again at my July retreat. So that's how much fun we had with embossing. So I need to order some clear embossing powder. Now once this is all covered, you will heat this up just like you normally do. The only thing that I would caution you about again is the tendency of acrylic paint to bubble. So either the Stampin' Up! Heat gun has 2 heat settings. Either use the lower one or work fast and keep moving. Don't leave the heat gun in one place too long because you don't want to heat up that paint underneath the embossing powder. But just make sure it's all melted. Since the background's white, you want to make sure you've peaked in all of it. And now you have a gorgeous background that really looks like frescoed plaster. And it looks like the butterflies are just barely emerging out of there and your color is a little bit more muted. It's such a fun technique and so easy to do with any embossing folder. I really hope you give it a try. Thanks so much for watching.